Welcome back to Watch the Booker Man and to the 5th episode of Paul Heyman's TNA 2010. As you can see, we are just 24 hours removed from the previous show that I booked in-game, but of course this is the show that will air the next Thursday on Spike TV. I'm just currently doing them back-to-back, so I do one show on the Thursday, which goes out on the Thursday, then one on the Friday for the following week. I'm just finding it a little bit easier to do those two shows back-to-back, then I can get them booked in close proximity to each other, with then having 13 days to make sure everything's in the right places for the next lot of shows. I'm just finding it helps me plan things out a little bit better. We're in the Impact Zone again for this, and I want to just get straight into the show. We begin with a recap package of last week's episode, looking at the closing moments of that show. Desmond Wolf's involvement in the main event cost AJ Styles an Amazing Red against the Motor City Machine Guns, but after the match, Wolf took out the tag team champions as well. He was not out to help anybody, he was just out to cause destruction, as he declared himself the next World Heavyweight Champion of TNA. His attack on Sabin and Shelley, though, would bring out Beer Money, who we thought maybe were going to invoke their Feast or Fired. While they retreated when AJ questioned them on this, there was obviously a lot of suspicion around them. They claimed they were just coming out to check on Motor City Machine Guns, but Styles didn't buy it, and neither did Taz and Maro, as they introduced fans to TNA Impact, questioning the motives of Beer Money. And the first segment of the night also carries on that storyline, as Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin, who have been a big part of the show so far, they've been on all 4 shows that I've booked and won a match, and they're in action again tonight, asking for the footage to be played once again. We'd just seen the footage, but they wanted the fans to really watch it and see what they think. Sabin says that it looks to him like Beer Money were ready to take advantage of them being down and out, but they want to hear from Storm and Rude. They don't want to go around making accusations before hearing from Beer Money themselves. Storm and Rude come out, and Storm lays the case down on the ramp, leaving it behind them as they head to the ring, a symbolic gesture, and Rude says that watching the footage back, they admit it does look bad. But Storm says that since winning that briefcase, they have made one thing clear. They've said it again and again and again. They will pre-announce. They're not going to look to take the cheap route. They look the champions in the eyes and tell them they will stick to that no matter what. When Beer Money take their World Tag Team title shot, the Motor City Machine Guns will know well in advance. Beer Money then offer Sabin and Shelley a handshake, and after a little brief hesitation, the Motor City Machine Guns accept that gesture. They're not obviously going to 100% trust Beer Money, but they are feeling like they mean what they say. Alex Shelley underperforming, Rude looking good. The Motor City Machine Guns not doing well without a script, so something to keep in mind. Maybe script them in their promos in future. It's certainly their in-ring work is their strong suit, so no arguments with that. But Beer Money doing really well, and it's a decent opening segment, not good, but okay, nothing wrong with that, as they win a decisive victory. Not much more to say about it other than a complete showcase of the Motor City Machine Guns. Dominant victory, 2 good performances from them, and not a great match, but after the match, it's all just about showing that the Motor City Machine Guns have had a red hot start to 2010. They've won 5 matches already this year from 5 possible shows, and despite being promised by Beer Money earlier that they wouldn't invoke their briefcase shot without a fair warning, the champs are still a little bit on edge. They're looking over their shoulders, they're on guard just in case Beer Money had anything in mind. 41 rated segment, losing heat to the storyline, but the Motor City Machine Guns still building that momentum. We then continue to talk about last week's ending. It was a big angle to end the show just because it brought so many different things into it, and AJ Styles is now talking about Desmond Wolf's part of that segment. He wants a World Heavyweight title shot, but he's going to have to earn it. The attack last week isn't how you go about becoming the number 1 contender, but it is how you pick a fight with AJ Styles. Styles says that the next time he sees Desmond Wolf, he is going to beat his ass, and if it's a fight Wolf wants, he knows where to find the World Heavyweight Champion. If Wolf doesn't come to find him, then the champ is going to come for Wolf. AJ doing better there in that segment, improvising well, a 71 rating, advancing the world title storyline between Desmond Wolf and AJ Styles as it is now, and of course that's going to continue to play out throughout the course of tonight's show. Maro and Taz then introduced footage from last week's episode where Kurt Angle headbutted Mr. Anderson. It was clearly an overreaction to some very light-hearted jokes from Mr. Anderson. He barely even said anything wrong, and Angle just decided to go for him. Later in the evening, we saw that Mr. Anderson seemed to accept an apology from Kurt Angle, who told him to forget about it. But tonight, the two men have been put together in the main event match. Paul Heyman obviously looking to play on the little bit of tension that's probably still remaining by having Kurt Angle and Mr. Anderson face Desmond Wolf and a partner of his choosing. That, like I said, in tonight's main event. We then get a match, the second match of the night, and Angelina Love picks up a decisive win. It's another one-sided match, just like the opener was, and she beats Roxy with a breaker bitch. I can't quite remember what that move is. Is it a pedigree maybe? Not sure. Again, something else I'll have to look into. Angelina Love with a 59, so that is a good performance for her back in the TNA ring. She's been away for a little while, so that is a very positive side. That puts her up there with ODB and Tara, even Kong, as the best performers in the women's division. After the match is the more important thing though, as the rest of the beautiful people join Angelina Love in the ring. They're jumping for joy. Love's decisive return to action. Love then takes a microphone, but she doesn't react how Velvet Sky and co would have expected. Instead, she turns on the beautiful people a little bit, says that she's been watching from home these last few months, and the beautiful people have lost their edge. She says that Velvet Sky and Madison Rayne have had chances to become the Knockouts Tag Team Champions, and Lacey, she doesn't know what to say about Lacey. Lacey, who was already holding back a little bit, she's less familiar with Angelina Love than Madison and Velvet are, and she puts her head down. She clearly... The idea is that Angelina Love's a little bit disapproving of Lacey being added to the group, and that's going to be something we play on further and further down the line. Before Love can continue her promo, whatever she was going to say, Tara, Sarita and Taylor Wilde come out and go after the beautiful people. The numbers advantage, the 4-on-3, allows Love to escape the ring and head up the ramp. She's not getting involved with anybody, and Tara, Sarita and Taylor Wilde get the better of the 3 remaining members of the beautiful people. When Love reaches the top of the ramp, she smiles. She seems unconcerned for her teammates getting beaten down. A little bit of a manipulative side showing from her, but her demeanour quickly changes as ODB comes out to the top of the ramp and confronts her. The two go face to face as we go into a commercial or whatever, because we come back with Mike Tenay's latest sit-down interview, and he is talking with Mick Foley. It's a really, really good segment. As you'd expect, it's Mick Foley rated on his entertainment, so it was always going to be really, really good. And he's just saying, like Team 3D and Rhino, who have felt pushed aside by somebody they have a lot of history with in Paul Heyman, he too feels that way. And while he is really, really enjoying what he's seeing on Impact since the start of the year, these great talents going out there and putting on excellent matches week on week, but he has to admit it hurts a little to not be considered a key part of this show. Mick Foley says that Paul Heyman might think that he has nothing left to contribute, but he still has a contract and some influence here in TNA, and he isn't going to leave without getting at least the chance to prove himself. Mick Foley, of course, one of the key figures in the history of wrestling, one of my favourites growing up, but he is another one who is a little bit out of sync with the vision that we're going for. So again, we're just bringing it on screen. I do have an idea for Mick Foley going forward that plays off this that we're building into now. I just feel like when there's people who I kind of have a thing where I'm not 100% sure what to do with them, like the Lashley thing where I didn't know whether he was going or staying, I think just playing it out on screen is just an interesting way to help me work these things out, and maybe by having Mick Foley do a couple of interviews, I'll get more of a concrete direction for him. Hopefully, if not, they can just be decent segments, Mick Foley putting over the youngsters that we've seen, so all in all, a positive segment, even if nothing else comes from it. We then see Desmond Wolfe enter the locker room, and he approaches Daniels, who is stood with his heavy Tomko. Beside where Daniels sits, we see Suicide's mask has been laid on a bench, implying that the man behind the mask is roaming the building unmasked, but seemingly avoiding detection because people don't know who he is. Daniels tells Wolfe not to touch the mask because Wolfe clearly has an eye on it. He's intrigued just as everybody else is, and asks what Wolfe wants. Wolfe says that he's got to find a partner for tonight's main event, and since he doesn't play well with others, he thought he'd find somebody who does. Daniels agrees that he will team with Wolfe in the main event, and Desmond suggests that he brings his buddies Tomko and Suicide with him. So Wolfe thinking on there, realising that Daniels has his people who will get involved and help him, which gives him a better chance of winning in the main event. So we're continuing to put over Wolfe. He's sort of, we're building him as he's on another level. He's always thinking, he's always got a grand plan for everything, and he's out thinking people on a week to week. That's kind of where I want his character to go. I think when they brought Wolfe in, they were just trying to do this badass thing, and I've watched his promos from the time, and I don't think whether it was him or whether it was the people writing the promos, it just didn't suit him for me. So we're trying to get him a bit more of a cerebral approach, and hopefully he comes across well as we continue to build him in the main event storyline. Before the next match, the third match of the hour, the commentators discuss the recent fortunes of Lethal Consequences. Taz says that the boys clearly have a lot of potential, but something just hasn't been right with them this year. Mauro adds that after last week, it seemed like the message was finally getting through to them, and all day there's been talk of a new Lethal Consequences. As Lethal and Creed then make their entrance for the match, we see that they have a new entrance theme, a new video. There's been a complete repackage, and they are actually introduced not as Black Machismo and Consequences Creed, but as Jay Lethal and Austin Creed. And the change seems to do them well. There's still sort of high energy involving the fans. It's not like they're completely disregarding who they previously were, but there's a clear focus to their in-ring work, and Lethal Consequences defeat the British Invasion in 11 minutes and 42. Lethal pinning Brutus Magnus following the Lethal combination. Austin Creed, the weak link again, as he has been in pretty much every match he's been involved in, but we're continuing to build him up, and he will be at that level soon. I've got no concerns about anything like that. As Jay Lethal and Austin Creed then celebrate getting back to winning ways, Eric Young leads the World Elite out from the back. Of course, British Invasion part of that group, but also Young said that they had this big plot. Seemingly Lethal Consequences are their target, or maybe only their first target. However, as the group approach the ring, the music of Abyss hits. Their attention obviously turns to him. He's an imposing figure who you can't ignore. The group members head up the ramp, and one by one they're taken down by the global champion Abyss. Eventually, just Eric Young remains, and he is face to face with a monster. His tormentor, who has over this last month particularly just had his number. EY does manage to escape, but with his group laid out, his layers of protection are looking weaker by the show. The World Elite really seems to be unravelling at the seams. The second hour of Impact begins with a match between Amazing Red and a familiar face, Johnny Gargano. Of course, at this time, not so much a familiar face, hence the 12 rating. His gimmick did get a great rating, but he is actually only here on a one-time deal. It's too early to bring Johnny Gargano in as a full-time member of the roster, I think, and definitely the 12 rating has proved me right in that assessment. It's almost a little bit of a tie-in with Evolve. Like I said last episode, I'm booking Evolve, and on the first show, Johnny Gargano picked up a victory. I'm pretty sure it was against Chris Dickinson. We mentioned on commentary actually that he's part of this Evolve upstart company. Not too much. We're not officially linked with him yet, so we're not sort of going to give him too much publicity, but Amazing Red picks up a win in what I think could be a good match, even with Gargano at this stage of his career, and it's a decisive victory. It says terrible wrestling, which obviously isn't accurate in the slightest, but a 49 rating, a 62 from Amazing Red, a particularly impressive performance, and the match was just a showcase for the X-Division champion who stands tall against all odds coming up in a few weeks, who will be the next challenger to his title. We then go to the locker room where Mr. Anderson approaches Kurt Angle, and once again he's reminding them that they're all good. He doesn't want Kurt to think there's any hard feelings. They need to trust each other tonight if they're going to team in the main event. Kurt thanks Anderson for his understanding and apologises once more, but Anderson insists, just forget about it, Kurt. Anderson says that if there's one thing they can agree on, it's that somebody needs to shut Daniels and especially Desmond Wolfe up once and for all. In the main event, that is their job. Kurt Angle and Mr. Anderson both improvising well throughout the segment. It's a 68, it was only 2 minutes, so not too much to take from that, but it does advance the storyline between them, which we've changed to forget about it. Obviously, nothing's going to go down between Anderson and Kurt Angle. The headbutt happened, they drew a line under it. What could possibly happen between them? Eric Young then cuts a promo from a dark, secluded area of the building, and for once, the World Elite leader is alone. EY looks to have completely lost it, as he furiously yells about Abyss being the bane of his existence. He wants the monster next week in a global championship match, and he wants it to be no DQ. So we're setting up a big match between them. We're going to bring all the weapons out. I think that's going to be a really, really exciting match to see next week, as we go into the heavily promoted return of D'Angelo Dinero. And after weeks of hype, he is back in the Impact Zone, and he's taking in the reaction. He is milking it for everything he can get. He's just standing on the ramp, looking around the arena, the money coming down from the ceiling, all that. But as he goes to walk down the ramp, he is jumped from behind by a steel pipe wielding Homicide. Homicide brutally attacks D'Angelo Dinero, and the commentators have no explanation for this random assault. Homicide's just a loose cannon, and he is relentless. Referees come out to try and stop him, but he pushes them away. There is no stopping Homicide. He clearly has a vendetta against D'Angelo Dinero and just lays into him with his pipe. A brutal attack, sort of a bait and switch. We've built up D'Angelo Dinero's return for all these weeks, and then cut off. He never even gets to make it to the ring because of Homicide's attack. Eventually Joe comes out from the back. He's asking him what he's doing, but Homicide turns on Joe too. He's in a complete rage. There's no reasoning with him. Joe gets in Homicide's face. The two of them sort of getting heated at each other, and as they leave to the back together, Homicide is saying that this has got nothing to do with a suicide situation, which Joe is trying to talk to Homicide about. Homicide says that this is all about Pope. So starting a storyline between Homicide and D'Angelo De Niro there, while moving Homicide a little bit away from his association with Joe, which we started only last week. Lack of anything interesting happening in this segment was a problem. I think I rated them all on overness. Probably should have done at least one of them, maybe Joe on entertainment. Forgot about that, and it was a 6-minute segment, so fair enough with that. It's a 45 rated segment, which is a bit of a disappointment actually, because I would have liked De Niro's return and the start of this storyline to get a bit of a better rating, and it does lose heat to the... So a very bad segment there, just because of an oversight from me when booking the show. And with Pope's return not going as planned, we send to the back where JB speaks to Generation Me, and it's just a filler segment to buy time. Nick and Matt Jackson talk about their arrival in TNA and how great it is to be part of such a fantastic roster. As they speak, London and Kendrick, two other newcomers, approach them and they offer advice about navigating a locker room and being new around here. They know how people can be when you're new in a locker room, and they're the guys who can help them in that sense. Nick and Matt are a little bit surprised by this, given that the Hooligans just debuted themselves, and sort of say thanks but no thanks to the offer of advice from Lundrick. They don't want to be taken under anybody's wing, and they walk off. Kendrick and London not looking happy. So that's 2 weeks in a row now. Brian Kendrick and London have had issue with Motor City Machine Guns and with Nick and Matt Jackson. You could again see both sides of this, I'd say. Nick and Matt Jackson being a little bit disrespectful because London and Kendrick were only trying to help them, but also Kendrick and London sort of acting a little bit above themselves. 3 of them doing well when improvising, Nick Jackson not doing so well, and we begin the Generation Gap storyline. So a little bit of an indication about where that's going to go as we lead into the Knockouts Championship match, which actually I forgot to mention earlier, but during that segment, that was a big part of what ODB was saying to Angelina Love. She came out when they went face to face. ODB was saying, "Don't you dare get involved in my match tonight." I think that was in the text for the angle, but underneath, and I didn't realise there was more to it. The match is 57 rated and 2 decent performances, but the beautiful people, all 4 of them come out after 8 minutes and just destroy the match. We don't get a winner. It's a draw, sports entertainment finish, because the beautiful people just lay into both members of the match. We're not going to turn ODB heel because plans have kind of changed with that, at least for the time being. Following the match, as the champion and challenger continue to be beaten down by the beautiful people, Taylor Wilde and Sarita come out to try and even up the odds, but it's too late. ODB and Tara are already down, and again it's just another 4-on-2 situation. For the second week in a row, Angelina Love stands over the Knockouts champion. Her words to her partners earlier seemingly done the trick, because they looked a cohesive unit as they took down 4 of the top contenders in the Knockouts division. We then get a interview in the back, Lauren Brooke talking with Jimmy Jacobs, who begins his promo by saying, "Welcome to the new age." He then looks to either side of him, bringing in the Knockouts Tag Team Champions, Awesome Kong and Hamada. We see that he's not done a very good job when improvising here, and it's a poor segment just because he's not very over. Yeah, disappointing, but again, it's a long-term thing, so I'm not going to worry too much. Jimmy Jacobs is going to be a big part of this roster, even if he absolutely is a blowout in terms of ratings. He's a key part of something that I've got planned, so I'm going to have to persist with him. But he says that these 2 women may not be what you expect to see when you tune into your wrestling on a Thursday night, and there's a whole world of talent out there right now who are just like that. They don't fit into what the television viewing audience might expect, and he knows because he's one of them. Jacob says that what we see right now is the seed of a movement that will take over pro wrestling. The new age is upon us, and TNA is where it's landing. After that, it is just about time for the main event, but the commentators give the promised update on Bobby Lashley just before the main event competitors come out. Marinello says that despite his initial desire to leave TNA, as he emphatically stated on the first episode of The Gear, Lashley is now open to talks with the company, and they are actually currently in talks about a restructured deal that would allow him greater freedoms regarding his MMA career, and he is going to work with Paul Heyman directly to ensure that balance can be found if a contract is signed with TNA, a new deal that is. It is stressed that no deal has been agreed of as of tonight, but they quote Paul Heyman, who says that he is confident that an agreement could be reached. Talks were advancing really well and were at very close stages, so we're optimistic that Bobby Lashley will be staying with TNA, but nothing is officially confirmed just yet. The main event is a good match, 73 rating, and it had fantastic heat and great wrestling, but it is Desmond Wolfe and Daniels who pick up a victory over Kurt Angle and Mr. Anderson. The team not proving such a good unit, as Mr. Anderson drops off the apron when Kurt Angle tries to bring his partner in, showing that it wasn't actually water under the bridge. Mr. Anderson obviously holding a grudge against Kurt Angle and choosing this match to take advantage of that. While Kurt Angle carried the match in terms of in-ring performance, he was left all alone to fend off Daniels and Desmond Wolfe. Not only that, Tomko was at ringside, also distracting him, and in the end, Desmond Wolfe was able to pin Kurt Angle with a jawbreaker lariat, catching him off guard, and Kurt Angle there with an 89 is a really, really good performance. Daniels is the next best, and actually Desmond Wolfe the worst performer in the match, so if he's going to main event the next pay-per-view, we do need to get him up a little bit, but picking up a win over Kurt Angle is surely the best way to do that. Wolfe was off his game, so we should expect better than him on a week-to-week basis, gaining heat to the Forget About It storyline, because clearly now Kurt Angle and Mr. Anderson do have issues, and that is going to carry on. And after the match, with the controversial finish out of the way, Desmond Wolfe and Daniels stand tall. Tomko then joined them in the ring. This almost looks like it's a further extension of Daniels' stable. Soon after, AJ Styles comes out, and while he gets past Tomko, who leaves the ring to try and stop him, Tomko is able to grab his leg as he enters the ring. Wolfe then hits an elbow to the head of AJ Styles, knocking him out in the ring. Daniels joins in the attack, and it's a 2-on-1 attack. Then becomes a 3-on-1 attack as Tomko joins them as well. Samoa Joe then runs down, obviously continuing his storyline with Daniels, making the save. This week he's the one swinging a chair, but Wolfe manages to get away. Joe lays into Daniels and Tomko, and Wolfe has a bit of a smug look on his face as he leaves. He got what he needed from Daniels and Tomko, and now they're getting beaten up. He couldn't care less about them. Wolfe is not in this to make friends, like he said earlier, and Daniels and Tomko shouldn't have expected anything different. Joe then has Daniels at his mercy, and while he's got his hands on Tomko a couple of times recently, it's really Daniels who he wants the revenge on, and he has Daniels begging for mercy. He's going to smack him on the head with a chair. This is how heated and how personal this has got. But Joe is then distracted when Suicide comes to the top of the ramp. Suicide has a microphone, and he tells Joe to stop because he is going to reveal his identity. Suicide then removes his mask to reveal Kazarian. Perhaps not that big of a surprise, and maybe a little bit of an underwhelming reveal for some people. It was fairly common knowledge that Kazarian was under the mask, but in the distraction, Daniels and Tomko are able to escape, join Suicide or Frankie Kazarian at the top of the stage. Kazarian, Tomko, Daniels stand tall, looking down at Samoa Joe in the ring. We have the reveal. It's a little bit of a shame to sort of lose the Suicide character, but I do have an idea going forward that can bring him back into the fold. Kazarian is back, and I just think that we've not seen him for a long time at this point. It's not that much of a shocking reveal, but it's been so long since Kazarian had been Kazarian on TNA that it is a little bit of a comeback for him. He had a storyline that he actually quit TNA about 2 years ago in terms of where we are now, so it does bring him back nicely, and an interesting explanation of why Kazarian was under the mask. There's a lot of questions to be answered with that as we end the show on a bit of a cliffhanger. The reveal that Kazarian is now part of that group, and I think Daniels and Kazarian, I was always going to put them together because I think as Bad Influence in TNA and as they are now the Addiction or SCU, there's just such a good team, works so well together. Unfortunately, we do lose popularity in our home region, but increase our popularity in 20 regions with a 59 rated episode of Impact, and hopefully people are intrigued to see where this storyline goes, Suicide's explanation, or Kazarian's explanation as I should say, and hopefully that next episode comes very, very soon.